If you love your commercial silverfish, I've got a mix here that's going to be absolutely perfect for it. I've been using it for the last few months now, and I think it's absolutely perfect when you're fishing for fish like skimmers and bream. In particular, places like Hallcroft, Barston, Meadowlands, anywhere that your target fish is decent stamp roach, right up to bream, this mix is absolutely perfect. So it's a three-way mix, and it all comprises around a pellety base, which I think is really important. A lot of these venues, the skimmers and bream, they see a lot of pellets, and I really want to maximise the pellety attraction of these ground baits, especially in the autumn and when you go into the cooler months. So my first mix I like to use is F1 Dark. I really like having a dark edge to my mix, especially when the water gets a little bit clearer. I think you need to tone down your ground baits, you know, not have bright green or sort of brown colours. I like to darken it off. So I'm going to get a pint tub, and 1 pint of F1 Dark is the starting point. So get it over a bucket. I will note, I like to do this at home in my garage, or wherever you know, just before your session. Like, try and do it a couple of hours before your session, because I want all the water that I'm going to add to the mix to absorb into these pellety particles and make the mix heavy. And that's important because a lot of the time I'm wanting to catch the fish on the bottom when I'm using ground bait. So I want my ground bait to be nice and heavy, so when it goes down it stays there and it's nice and inert on the bottom. So it's heavy, goes down, that's where I'm going to catch the fish. So kicking off, pint of F1 Dark, pop it in a bucket. The next part to my commercial silvers mix is 100% ground expander. You can't beat crushed expander in my opinion. Skimmers and bream absolutely love the stuff, and this is a real golden sort of brown, it's lovely colour, and it also adds a really nice like fluffy element to the mix. So I'm going to get a pint of that in there. The final part to the mix is the bagger mix. This stuff is a little bit more of a higher oil pellet content, and it's got a little bit more fish meal in it as well, which I think is important, especially in the autumn time, because it's not freezing cold yet. The skimmers and bream still going to be a little bit active, and they're going to want a little bit more of a fish mealy base in the mix. So I'm going to add a pint of the bagger mix in there. Do that, get it over your bucket so you don't waste any. And the beauty of having these 3 bags of ground bait is it lasts you 2 or 3 matches. You get loads out of it. Once you've mixed these 3 dry pints of ground bait, it like swells up a lot, so you get loads out of these 3 dry pints of ground bait. So now it's a case of just mixing it through, and you'll see it comes to a lovely colour. It's not too dark, not too brown or overpowering, anything like that, because there's still an element of, it's colder, you're going to be fishing for, you know, less bites, so you don't want your mix to be overpowering. That's why that F1 Dark and the 100% expander is really important, and it complements that bagger mix perfectly because it's not too strong, it's not too sort of negative either. It's a really nice blend, that is. So got them all mixed up there. You can see the colour is absolutely perfect. It's almost like a darky brown, and when you mix that up it goes to a, it's almost like a darky green colour. It's lovely. So now it's a case of adding the water, and as I said at the start of this film, I do this at home so all of those pellety particles in the ground bait get a chance to soak up the water. Now get yourself some water. You can either use lake water. Personally I use tap water at home. I do not think it makes a difference at all. I don't think the skimmers and bream are that fussy. So now it's a case of adding your water. Get the same tub. I'm going to add a full pint of water into the mix like that, and then half a pint of water straight in. So you'll then be left with what looks like a soup, but trust me, you don't have to panic or anything like that. There's a reason why I've added it all at once, and that's because I want all of those pellety particles to soak up that water. So just take your time now. I personally don't even use a whisk at this point because there's no need to, because all of these pellety particles, especially the 100% expander, really soak up all of that water really quickly. So it's almost like a paste now, and you'll be thinking, I've absolutely knackered my ground bait, but trust me, it's absolutely sound, because all of those pellety particles, like I've said before, will soak it all up. And if you leave that 15 minutes, 20 minutes, usually I leave that in a bucket, drive to the venue, As soon as I get to the venue, I'll then get the bucket out of the van and get it on a maggot riddle. And as you'll see here, bit like Blue Peter fashion, what I mixed up earlier, and you'll get these like big blobs of the ground bait. As you can see here, it's already starting to go like that, and that's really good. That's what I want, because it means it's heavy, it's damp, and it's got a lot of the water is absorbed in that ground bait particles. So now it's a case of just pushing it through a maggot riddle. I've got a 3mm maggot riddle here. Is it the 3mm? I think it might be the 4mm. I might be lying to you. I think it is the 4mm. Yeah, 4mm. So I'm going to push it through a maggot riddle now, get it through. It's a lovely consistency, this as well. It's not too many big massive particles, because you don't want too many big particles for the fish to, you know, get concentrated on or a little bit focused on. You want your hook bait and the baits that you're putting in to really sort of have an effect, and that's why this is it's not a fine ground bait, but it's not too big of particles in it. Because when I'm going to be adding things like minced worms or dead maggots, I really want them to stand out on this ground bait. And now you will be left with the absolute perfect fluffy ground bait that's, in my opinion, the absolute best for commercial silvers and bream. Anything where you're targeting silverfish on commercials, that is the perfect mix. And how I'd actually introduce this into my peg, most of the time I'll be feeding it with a little pole pot on the end of my pole if I'm wanting regular bait going in my peg, but usually at the start I'll just sandcastle this in, long pole, short pole, anything like that. And why I'd sandcastle it in, and what I mean by that is I'd scoop my pole pot in the ground bait and I'd just pat it on top, and then I'd ship it out and I'd literally turn my pot up over the water and let that ground bait all sink to the bottom. And what will happen then is it'll almost end on the floor like that on the bottom of the lake. So, and that is so attractive to fish, and all of those pellet content in there, all of the smell, the sweet smell, and that pellety base will really attract lots of silverfish into your peg. So get on that mix if you want to catch loads of commercial silvers.